When you consider your future farm life, do you dare to dream big or barely dare to dream at all? Either way, you'll find hope and inspiration as we chat with flower farmer Heather Meehan on this episode of Food, Flowers, and Fun. If you're the woman who does it all, farm work, housework, bookwork, homework, getting up at the break of dawn, this is the podcast for you.
How do you multiply by fractions now?
Get away from the cares of the day. Free stock, root stock, feed stock, seed stock. Chat with women around the world who raise food, flowers, and fun. With your host, Kay Castrataro. That's me. Welcome back to Food, Flowers, and Fun Visits with farm women from around the world. And today we have Heather Meehan with us from the Daisy Edition. And as always, our guest is brought to us courtesy of Penlight for Farmers, which is helping you to create more abundant, purposeful lives with lots of time and lots of energy. Heather, welcome. We are recording just a few days after Christmas, so it's going to be like one of the first episodes of the new year. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, well, I'm so glad that you agreed to come on with us. So you do flowers, but you have kind of a varied background in agriculture. So I was wondering if you could start out by just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got to Rhode Island, because you weren't originally from here, and kind of tell us about everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, I've my whole life I've wanted to be outside and around plants, but I didn't necessarily start out with that as a professional career or something that I was pursuing as what it is now, which is what I've built my life around. So I came into farming and into starting my own cut flower farm in a little bit of a roundabout way, which is that I started working in the nonprofit sector for an organization that supported farmers and did some food business incubation on the east end of Long Island. So I was pretty early still in my career, and I was helping all of these farmers and organizing educational events and learning a lot from all of the folks that I was meeting in the food system, and just was very inspired. I had an interest in kind of food for a long time. My dad is a chef, and I had worked at farm to table restaurants, etc. But I started feeling really, really connected to the people growing food and working on the land and working with the land. And like many people, sort of took a pivot during the pandemic and said, I'm gonna start farming as a try it out as a job because just
Stuck
all
at
my
home, I might as well do farming, right?
why not? Yeah, all of my friends were farmers at that point, and I was like, you guys
Yep.
are all so cool. You have the best overalls and boots, and I wanted a part of it. So I
It's all about the clothing.
yeah, the wardrobe and actually
Yeah.
getting some dirt on it.
The farmer
Um,
tans, there's something about that.
exactly. So I did an apprenticeship at Quail Hill Farm in Amagansett, New York, which is they've had a pick your own CSA for over 30 years at this point. And
They were on the cutting edge of CSAs.
they were, yeah, they've been doing it for a long time before it became really part of the farming mainstream, I guess you
Yeah.
could say.
No, well, I think that's a really good way to say it because for well, when I was growing up anyway, back in the Stone Ages, it felt like CSAs were almost like an alternative form of farming. Like it wasn't, for some of us who grew up on multi-generational farms with some baggage, it was like a different type of farming because your customers weren't just your customers, they were actually kind of your partners. And so it was just a whole different way of looking at the farming business. So yeah, I think it's a fascinating model and I love it. And it has become mainstream, but you're right, 30 years ago it was definitely not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really credit that first experience that I had with giving me a great foundation in how to farm and we all were taught how to operate the tractor and it is a nonprofit farm, so they had an educational mission, so they were able to kind of take the time to really give the apprentices an education while still, being a production farm. And we were definitely like hoeing 300-foot beds of winter squash, etc.
Yeah.
So it was a really good first experience. And they grew about an acre of flowers,
Okay.
which it's so funny because when I started working there, I was like, flowers, okay, that's so impractical. Who cares? I was all about the food at that point,
Uh-huh.
and I definitely was enchanted by growing the flowers, and it was just a slightly different process. I got to participate in some of the arranging for the farmers market bouquets, so that sort of sparked something that then I went on to work at a couple of other small farms on the east end of Long Island, one of which Island Time Farm was exclusively flowers, and then just sort of went fully, fully in
Yeah, so
on
you kind of
that.
morphed. I was noticing that transition where you had started with the food and I really want to pick up on the word practical that you used
Mm.
about flowers not seeming practical. And it's interesting because one of the reasons that I ended up calling this podcast Food, Flowers, and Fun was because I wanted to bring in all of the different types of agriculture that we do. So the food production is obviously a very critical part of what farmers do. But creating beauty and also creating experiences is also super, super important, especially in our time and culture. So I love how you shifted from the impractical to, a different way of viewing that floral business because I think having beauty is absolutely essential to who we are as humans. So it's very valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my perspective on it has shifted a lot, even from so what really gave me the shove to go in the direction of flowers initially is that I did a farm business planning workshop, specifically focused on budgeting, and we wrote out a budget for, a classic kind of market garden style small vegetable farm. And I was just like,
And
what?
the numbers
There's
were just not working out for
how
you,
does
were
this,
they?
the math isn't mathing. Like, there's just no way to make this make sense. Although clearly, many people have very successful business models. So, but my initial reaction to that, because I would say, since I've fallen in love with farming, it's kind of like it's a lifestyle that I want to have. And so I've been figuring out, how do I make this work economically, has been a big driver. And I saw at that time some more economic opportunity in flowers. now I have a little more nuanced view of it where I think it really all depends, right? And there's farms of all scales and types that are making it work and making a living, but ironically that's what pushed me in the direction of flowers. And I ended up coming to Rhode Island to work at Little State Flower Company, which was is also an extremely successful flower farm business. I learned so much there, and it really, blew open my idea about what is possible in farming.
Mhm.
Um, and
Ooh, can you unpack that a little bit? So, I love that phrase about opening your mind to what is possible in farming. Can you unpack that for us a little bit and tell us what it was that you were seeing as possibilities that maybe you hadn't seen before?
yeah, well, I think on multiple levels it did that because for one thing, we were growing year round. So they and um Little State still does grow every month of the year and has
Mhm.
flowers available for sale, which I had farmed through the winter before and had storage crops, but that really
It was
opened up
different.
a new world of possibilities. And also seeing someone who is able to build a business that is a first generation farmer and started from scratch and was eventually able to buy land and create a sustainable lifestyle is really what I aspire to. So seeing that that was possible,
Mm.
and being a part of it as the I was
Yeah.
the farm manager there for a couple of years was really inspiring because I think it you know a lot of, not all, but some farmers, including myself, we can fall into a mentality of I have to work really hard and maybe I don't always reap my rewards. And um, Anna Jane, who's the owner of Little State, is really good about setting boundaries with her business and her life and having, obviously it's a lot of work and it does take over your life sometimes, but being able to have a high quality of life and set the set the boundaries where you need them to be for what your situation is,
Right.
which is tricky. And I think it's an ongoing, we navigate that every single day. It's not like you
Yeah.
decide once and then it's done. But
No, because we're constantly evolving. We're evolving as individuals, we're evolving as business owners, our farms are evolving, families can evolve. So I think all of those changing aspects, I've talked about that before on this show where, I kind of used to have this idea that if you found balance, and once you found balance, you just had to like maintain balance. It's like you're up on the tight wire, and as soon as you get the balance, you're good. Like then you can just stay there. And it's not like that because as you said, every single day is throwing new stuff at you. And so the tight wire you walked yesterday is not the one you're walking today. And there has to be a sense of fluidity. Sorry, I just hit my cat in the head. He's giving me his paw, like seriously. But I do think that idea of being flexible and kind of figuring it out as we go is super, super important. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And that's something that farming has really taught me, I think, because and that I've needed to embody because
Mm,
I am not inherently a super go with the flow person. Not that all farming is that. Obviously, there's a lot of planning and
Mhm.
forecasting and forethought, but I like to make a plan and have things go according to plan, as many of us do,
So,
which is,
sorry, that was an evil chuckle that I just gave.
um, that's, but what is the saying? Like, we make plans and God laughs or something along those lines. And I think the seasonality of farming and trying to make a living as a farmer and then also starting my own business and balancing that with having other work and other responsibilities has humbled me in a way, but it also provides me with a lot of hope on a
Mm,
daily basis because there's always the next season, there's always the next crop, there's always
there's always
something
tomorrow.
to look forward to that
Yeah.
something that you're working towards that you can adjust the plan so that things can go better, based on what you're learning in the moment.
Oh, I
Um,
really love that too. I'm gonna just hop on that for a minute too. The idea that is another big theme that comes up here a lot is, that idea that I don't really like looking at anything as a failure anymore. It's more like these are learning opportunities, and when things go well, it's a learning opportunity. And when things go poorly, it's a learning opportunity. And it's all just information. Like we take it, we work with it. And yes, there are going to be days where it's really frustrating when our plans don't come out the way that we wanted them to. And then we'll have 18 moments where I love it when a plan comes together, And so, but we don't want to be tied to the results so much that you know, we're rising and falling with that because I mean that's not a healthy way to be. And so I love that idea of, you know, taking in the information, learning what we can, and knowing that there are opportunities to do it better and differently in the future. And that future can be as early as like this afternoon or tomorrow.
yeah,
Really, like we don't have
totally.
to wait until we don't have to wait till the calendar changes to do something different. Like we can start making adjustments in the moment and see how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so I sell at the Aquidneck Growers Market in Newport, and the farmers markets have their pros and cons as a sales outlet, but they're really good, I think, as a beginning grower,
Mm.
who's new to owning my business to connect with customers, have a platform, gather information, because people will give me feedback in real time. And it was so interesting to see. I had a running joke with myself that whatever I thought was the best item that was gonna like fly off the stand on a given week, they wanted
Wasn't
the
going to be it.
exact opposite of that. So it was really, but that's all valuable information, right? And sometimes I was able to adjust things in real time because I was working the markets myself, so I could say, okay, people keep
Your
asking
arrangements.
me if they can buy like mix and match dahlias by the stem. This week I can put out a few buckets and have these are available by the stem. And then those sell really well for some reason. People want to be able to pick
Yeah.
out their own flowers. So things like that where I couldn't have I certainly wasn't able to predict exactly what people wanted, but they would indicate to me in person, and then I could adjust accordingly, which I think is definitely important as a business owner to be able to be responsive and,
Yeah.
read the room, I guess.
Yeah, and I like a lot about that too because um I'm a terrible flower arranger. My sister does wedding flowers and she is, oh, I've got one of her arrangements here for my mom's party, but gorgeous. Like what she does, and I know I'm the big sister, but honestly, like the work that she does is outstanding.
Mm.
And I get the very same flowers. Like I'll help her set up a wedding, and by set up, I mean I carry things. I don't design. I refuse. I'm like, do not ask me to put flowers in places because it'll look terrible. And she's like, oh, how bad can it look? Well, I take her gorgeous high-end flowers and I bring them home and I stick them in a vase. And she's like, just put them in a vase. Sure, just put them in a vase. And they look terrible. And she comes in and she swaps, and it's like amazing. So I would be one of those people at your markets who's like, no, no, just give me something that I can literally unwrap and put in a vase the way it is because I can't design my way out of a brown paper bag. But a lot of other people, whether they can design or not, they like to do that. Like they like to futz around with it and play with them. So I think that's really interesting. Have you noticed that that different markets have different qualities to them? Like, do you have customers at a certain market that might want something that customers at another market don't like as much?
I I don't know that I've seen long-standing patterns yet, or that but I only did the Equinic growers in Newport and then the Mount Hope in Bristol
Mm,
this past season. So
good markets.
yeah, both had similar items that were popular. Definitely mixed bouquets. Zinnias actually were one of my top sellers at both
Interesting.
markets. Um, there definitely were some differences in just the quantities or price points that people were comfortable with because, of course, Newport is Newport, so you have people that just will scoop up an armload of bouquets and not think anything of
Yeah,
it.
they don't even look at the price tag. There, it's kind of the if you have to ask how much it costs, then you can't afford it sort of thing. That would not
Yeah,
be
exactly.
my thing.
Which is not, yeah, and it's, certainly not everyone is like that, but
No.
there's enough people that, which was helpful for sales, but I think probably over time as my business matures, I'll be able to see those patterns a little bit more.
So do you find yourself adjusting your prices depending on which market you're at? I shouldn't. I don't know if we should say this, but
Um,
in theory, could you see that some farmers might decide to price the same product differently depending on the market that they are at, the particular
so
farmers
I
market?
guess what I would say about that is um, I I made some adjustments as far as like my time and also maybe like stem counts. So I think a lot about what I'm charging per stem,
Good.
um,
Yeah.
based on what it cost me to grow that flower.
Sure.
So I could do a smaller bunch. So I'm still getting the same price per stem, but maybe the sticker shock is a little bit less. And that was I'm still early on, so I did some like price adjustments at both of my markets just based on if I really didn't see things moving, then maybe I, make the bunch size a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
And the Bristol market, just because there was a little less foot traffic, I ended up making my bouquets on site, which
Ah,
is kind of fun for, people like seeing you
sure.
arrange in real time. But that way I also didn't have to invest like a couple hours the day before of making bouquets, and I just made what I sold that day.
Right.
So being a little more efficient with my time. So that's how I approached those kind of
Yeah.
scenarios.
Which again works really well if you have a market that is a little bit on the slower side. You know, if you have a really busy market, you might not have the time in between customers to do that. So again, I like that I like the different options that you've kind of integrated into different ways of operating your business. Um, yeah, yeah, very interesting. So we talked about, you know, being a beginning farmer a little bit, and we've talked about, you know, how you oh so wisely did a business plan ahead of time, which, you know, as the farm advisor here, I love it every time somebody says, "No, I actually like planned stuff out and I did my research and, you know, I walked into this with an idea of what I was growing and how much I could expect to make off of that." And I also love how you adjust the bouquet sizes, you know, but that it's the cost per stem that's really more important to you because you're looking at the production costs. So I love all of that. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what it's like finding access to land. You mentioned that Little State was able to, you know, come in as a first generation farmer, buy land in Rhode Island, which is not cheap. I mean, we have the highest cost of farmland in the state, I mean, in the country. So it's, you know, it's a big thing to be able to buy land here. So, you know, how are you navigating that right now?
Yeah, I definitely would say land land access and land tenure is a big concern. And for all of the reasons that you mentioned, as well as, as is the case with, I would say maybe all or at least the majority of people that I know who are my age, I don't own a home. So I'm also navigating like, renting an apartment and where is the apartment going to be versus where is the land and other just the other things that come with, being a person in society, like health insurance, student loans, etc. So, and I mention all of those things because I think it's all like it's also related
Yeah.
and it's hard to have have a successful business if you're not addressing all of these other expenses and concerns that you have, which are pretty common to most people in
Sure.
my experience. But I I wanted to um well, let me yeah, I was okay with leasing land as in the beginning of my business. I mean, I didn't really feel like I had another option of purchasing, but I also was okay with having a, lower investment, lower commitment as I did a proof of concept. But finding available land at the scale that I need it hasn't been all that difficult because I'm only growing on about a quarter of an acre at the moment. And I do hope to expand that at some point and have some more perennials and have a little bit more in production. But I'm not aiming to be on operating on a super large scale.
Yeah.
So finding that amount of open land hasn't been an issue, but being able to have long-term access to the right kind of land situation has been challenging. And there are certain things that don't always go hand in hand with farmland, but that are necessary to run a successful business, such as access to electricity so that you can have a cooler, to get the field heat out of your crops and to preserve their shelf life. And having some kind of, obviously running water for irrigation, but also for flowers take a lot of water. There's a lot of washing and
Yeah.
filling of buckets. And obviously if you're a vegetable farmer, you need a wash pack as well. And even as a beginning grower, like the amount of tools and things that I have assembled that need storage space is quite a lot, which so if your field, which the one that I lease currently had a very small storage shed, but definitely not adequate with what my needs are. And it's something that I'm working with my leaseholder for next year. We're getting an expanded storage space, but there's a lot of things like that, which I think there's some there's some room for education for landowners as well who want to lease their land to farmers because it doesn't always look exactly like what they might think. And there's also, as if you're a non-farming landowner, why would you know that all these things are necessary?
Right.
Or
Or if
high
you're
tunnels
dealing
like that,
dealing with a
those.
different type of agriculture, like I think about that a lot because, I have a small, like 3 acres, but I have a barn. I used to have horses, so I've got the stalls, I've got the frost-free waters, I've got all that stuff. And so oftentimes people will say to me, well, why aren't you renting out your barn to like horse people? And I'm like, well, I don't have an arena, either an outdoor or an indoor. So 99% of people who want to board their horses somewhere want to have a place to ride. I'm not really willing to chew up my, you know, 2 acres of paddock because somebody wants to ride around in circles in there. That's not going to work for me. And then it's like, well, they can trailer, but then I've got somebody coming in at all hours of the day and night because, they want to ride when they want to ride. And do I want somebody on my space, in my space with, this is their leisure activity. So they're going to come at the same time that I want my leisure time. And so, again, these are things that because I've had horses, because I've worked at horse stables, like I know all of these things and I can look at the cost benefits. And then with horses, it's like, well, and then when somebody runs out of money, then I'm stuck with their horse because
Mhm.
I don't really want to try to finance somebody else's horse. So not that all horse people do that, but I've known situations where that's happened. But again, if you're not familiar with that, you go into it and you're like, oh, I'm going to rent my barn out to horse people and it's going to be great and I'm going to get money every month and then you've got people driving in and you're like, wait, what? And then you've got divots in your pasture. Wait, what? And so, yeah, I think you're right. Like educating landowners is super, super important so that they not only know what you need, but they can start deciding either what kind of infrastructure they want to invest in or how to make it attractive for you to come up with other options. Like there are lots of different ways that these kinds of things can work, but to know what they're getting into. And yeah, I think
Yeah,
those are really
absolutely. I mean,
valid points.
I certainly want to encourage people to, lease the land that they have because it's, as you mentioned, where there's, Rhode Island buying farmland is very out of reach for many of us.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think there's just a lot that can go into it on both sides of the equation and making
Yeah.
sure that you're having open conversations and navigating those things and asking questions because it may not always be clear from the beginning to the farmer either, all of the things that they may want.
Yeah,
So
of
I think
course.
it's an ongoing it's an ongoing dialogue, but it's definitely challenging, but a worthwhile one to have.
Yeah, and I think again that communication piece is super important because especially like I am a landlord. I have a tenant in a little house right next to my house. And so I've had both a good tenant situation and a not so good tenant situation. And I know that when I get a good tenant, I want to keep them. I don't want to price them out of the house. I don't want it because a little bit less money up front is worth it for me in the long run because I'm not chasing them every month for the rent. I'm not dealing with needles when I go to change out the appliances, which yes has happened to me, and I'm like, why do we have needles behind like what is going on in my house? And so when you have somebody who's not doing all of that stuff, that's a really good thing. And I think it's important for landowners and farmers to realize that, it's important to be a good tenant and it's important to be a good landowner. And those are skills, those are not necessarily things that we're born knowing how to do. And so learning how to communicate, learning how to ask those questions, because it's really easy to get into a situation where people are like, oh my gosh, they're taking advantage of me. They're doing this, they're doing that. And it could just be happening out of ignorance because, as you said, the farmer doesn't always know what they need, especially if you're dealing with a farmer who's never leased land before. Maybe they didn't think about the fact that they're like, oh, yeah, I have all my tools, but that shed isn't going to fit those tools. And I need a cooler. So I could either put a cooler in there or do the tools, but I can't fit both. And are they going to let me have a cooler? Do we have, all of those kinds of things that you might not think about. So, do you have some situations that you've had to navigate? Because we like to talk about how to overcome challenging communication stuff here. I'm wondering if you've had anything where, you've had to have some of those discussions with your landlord. Well, you mentioned the
Yeah.
cooler and the infrastructure, that there was a need for additional infrastructure. Can you maybe just share how that conversation went for you guys? Like, how did you realize you needed more than what you had, and how did you bring that up with them?
Yeah, I think I probably knew, yeah, I did know more or less from the beginning of my current lease, which I've started out as a 1 year lease and I've renewed for another year. Um, I knew that there were going to be some infrastructure challenges and that I was just going to make it work because there there were other benefits of leasing the land and just being able to get going.
Mhm. Can you just parse that out for people a little bit? Because I think this is a good conversation to let people just hear, the thought process that goes into how you're deciding what piece of land to make work and what to
Mhm.
just walk away from. What were some of the pluses that made up for the infrastructure lacks?
Well, for me, the location was desirable because it's in Middletown, not far from Newport, and am interested in doing a pick your own, which I did trial this past year. And I also lease from Aquidneck Community Table, who runs the farmers market that I go to. So having that relationship with them um, was beneficial to me. And there's a community garden on site there, and I developed a good relationship with some of the community gardeners that grow there, and that it was a nice morale booster, honestly,
Mhm.
having other people out there at
Yeah,
times that I
no,
could chit
yeah,
chat
it's
with.
it's not like you're out by yourself all day,
Yeah.
every day trying to. trying to keep your mojo going on your own. You've got other people there to chat with and, encourage each other.
Exactly. Yeah, which I think as someone who is working on my own a lot of the time, that's not to be underestimated.
Mm,
Just having some human contact. So and the land had previously been used by a different farmer. So some areas that some of the alternatives that I looked at were basically hay fields that maybe had been farmland at one point, but it was like, 10 years ago versus this had been farmed in the previous year.
yeah.
So, um,
Yeah, breaking that sod is not a fun thing to do, especially if you don't have good equipment. Stop it. Sorry. Cat bit me.
I'm surprised my cats aren't in here trying to
In the
interfere
beginning,
either.
when I first started doing this, he would show up periodically. It would be like once in a while, the cat would put in an appearance. And now he has decided that I don't know how he knows it, but he knows that it's podcast time. And so he gets right up in here at the very beginning, and then he just niggles at me the whole time. So, so I entertain him, I ignore him, and then every once in a while he bites and he becomes the center of the podcast. But we're gonna let him go. So he got down when I scolded him. So it does sound like you had a lot of things going for you in this place. And how are you navigating the logistical struggles?
Yeah, I think it's just been through a lot of ongoing conversations and being really open and upfront about what my needs are and knowing that, that's not necessarily always going to result in like this place may not meet all of my needs. For instance, I don't think there's the it's unlikely that they'll invest in putting electricity in, and I don't have the capital in my business to pay for that at the moment. Um,
And that's
but
a hard decision anyway, to take your capital and invest in somebody else's property. As
yeah,
as someone
exactly.
who lived on leased land, farmland for a long time, it is a tricky cost benefit kind of thing. Yeah, I get that.
And for some people, yeah, I mean, maybe if you, I've certainly known other farmers that have been on leased property for like a decade or more and have felt that it was worth it to
Hmm.
invest. I'm just not at that stage yet.
Hmm.
And, I think it's okay if the land manager or landowner's visions for the property don't perfectly align with the farmers. It's just like it's important to recognize where they differ. So I know then like okay, I'm gonna seek out another way of having a cooler so that I can store my flowers because as I want to do more wholesale and more events and things where I'm holding flowers for longer, I may not be you know, harvesting them and then selling them all the next day the way that I currently do. Um, I that has become more important to me than it I knew it was a factor initially, but it's become like kind of indispensable. So I've figured out a way to have a cooler for next season that won't be on site, which would be ideal, but at least I can kind of get around that for now. And then, other things we've worked together on, like getting a larger storage shed and kind of figuring out a plan for that. Um, and I think, it's not gonna probably have space for all of my tools, but it's a step in that direction,
Right.
and it makes sense for them to invest in something like that that will be used by future farmers on the land. So I think it's just, yeah, it's been an ongoing conversation and recognition of like what my needs are, and then if that's not a possibility on this piece of land, like, I looking at other solutions and other possibilities and ways that I can navigate around that, or vice versa.
Yeah, and it kind of circles back to, where we started out earlier, where we were talking about the being flexible and being able to look at, what works for me now might not work for me in a little time because our situations change. And so, yeah, when the priority is I want to get this business up and running, I need land. I need to be able to grow. I need to be close enough to the markets that, I can do what I need to do without pulling my hair out. And then as you grow, yeah, then that's not enough. And it's like, okay, so right now I can still stay on this land because I've got other options. And at some point, we'll be looking for something different
Yeah.
and planning that out and knowing that like I just thank you for sharing that your thought processes because I think it's important for farmers to hear other farmers talk through the decision making process and to say, oh, well, that wouldn't have been as important to me, but I see why it was important to them. And then it gives us permission to say, well, what's important to me now? And what am I willing to put up with and navigate around? And what am I not? Because, there are going to be things that are a no-go for you. And and so I think that's super, super valuable. So I'm sitting here and looking at the time that we're at, and I'm saying, oh, bother. Um, we're almost out of time. So I want to ask you the question that I ask all of my guests. If you had one piece of advice that you thought every farmer should have, what would that be?
Oh gosh. I should have been prepared for this because I've listened to other episodes. I think I would say, and certainly some farmers are already very good at this, so maybe they could disregard it, but I think across the board, and especially just thinking about other beginning farmers or early career, just to not be afraid to advocate for yourself,
Mm,
because I think, just this is a very valid career and a very important piece of work that we're doing and contributing to our communities and our society on
mm,
multiple levels. And I know I've felt some hesitancy about advocating for myself or sticking up for myself and feeling like, I'm in a vulnerable situation because I am asking people for opportunities to lease or opportunities to be at markets or opportunities to sell my flowers to them. But I've, am continually realizing that I have a skill set and a product that people value, and also that by standing firm when I need to, I can command respect as well.
mm.
And I think that in my experience, sometimes that's gets a little bit lost in our field more so than in other, let's say, like traditional
Yeah.
or more corporate settings, let's say, where it's a little more common to like advocate for yourself or ask for a raise, etc. But I just think it's important for farmers to feel that they can and should do that.
Yeah, and I think that's especially important for women farmers. I know that it is important for farmers of all genders, but I think women farmers and disadvantaged, minority farmers, I think they're even more susceptible to feeling like we have to take whatever we can get because I might not get this opportunity again. And so if I have to, take a little bit of a hit on different things, then I'll just put up with it because the end is worth the means. And it's not good for us to do that. And by standing up for what we need as individuals and doing it kindly, of course, but to be firm and to say, no, I really do need this, or this isn't going to work for me, you're actually supporting every other farmer out there as well, because then every other farmer who comes onto that piece of property is going to have a better experience because people are going to expect that farmers actually are professionals. They really do know what they're doing. They deserve to be treated with respect. They deserve to be well paid. Like, they deserve vacation time.
Hmm.
deserve they deserve all of these things that we expect for other occupations. So, oh, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, and I can't wait to see where you go in the next year or so. So it'll be exciting to watch how your business flourishes and how you transform and all of that greatness. Thank you so much, Heather. And I want to thank all of you for joining us on Food, Flowers, and Fun. And we will see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
How do you multiply by fractions, Mom?
Farmers calling, our show is all done. Goodbye, farewell, so long, adieu. See you next week, same time, same place for Food, Flowers, and Fun. Go in peace. Visit us at www.penlightfarmers.com.